Well, let's start with what really dominated the sports weekend. MAGA. The Trump dance is all over the place.
It is.
The effect is real. You've got it from UFC 309. John Jones, he retains, beats Stipe Miocic, celebrates in the octagon. President-elect Donald Trump there in attendance, along with, of course, UFC President Dana White. Elon Musk is there, and much more. He's giving the Trump dance. He jumps over the rails and celebrates there as well with a message for our president. Then you have on Sunday, it's all over the NFL. It has been, of course, with Joey Bosa last week celebrating the sack with the dance. You've got the Lions, Titans, Raiders. They've all got players doing this, as well as
Calvin Ridley for the Titans.
Calvin Ridley doing it. Yeah, that's right. It's everywhere. And what a complete about face from where we were in sports. Chad, you've mentioned 2016 to right now, going into Trump's second term. And to me, it's not really political at all. It's just trendy, which is what sports is supposed to be about. It's fun. And I can't help but watch this and go, man, I wonder, for instance, if this were 3 years ago, what Hub Arkush would do with his MVP vote if Lamar Jackson were to, give the Trump dance. Or, man, I wonder if Mina Kimes is not going to discuss said players who are doing this on air for highlight reels. But for whatever reason, there's still, CBS, for instance, who's editing this out of a Twitter, an X post, as if, they need the bandwidth, as Armando pointed out so well, for what they're about to post with their video, cutting out the celebration and cutting directly over to a shot of the owner, Mark Davis, whenever this was going on with the Raiders. Keep politics out of sports. That's what everyone was preaching. I don't look at this and think, man, this is way too political. I look at this as we're back to what we once were, and sports is fun.
It is incredible how you can just turn something on its head or just even tilt it a few degrees one way or the other. And certainly it suddenly takes on just a completely different complexion of how you would view it and the lens in which you view things. And I'm with you on this, Hutton. This is not, to me, some big political statement by anyone in the NFL or UFC or anything else. And I know John Jones said a lot where clearly he's in line with President Donald Trump and backing him, and that's fine when he goes down there and kind of presents him with the championship belt after the match. But what's interesting about this whole thing is it's such a crossover moment that it doesn't feel political. It feels just like a pop culture icon type thing. I can't even think of presidents that have sort of crossed over into this realm of not just a movement, but of sort of icon status with other people in culture mimicking them and doing things like this, right? It's just it's like a weird Venn diagram of sport, of politics, of everything. But it's not like I come across watching this and thinking, boy, this is a really overtly political statement
so I view it
by Calvin Ridley of the Titans or whoever else.
Yeah.
I view it as it's a funny
like
TikTok phenomenon that was sparked by a very old white man that just won the presidency dancing to Village People in a funny way. So now I can turn it into something hilarious also, and everybody can laugh at it. Let's do things where just everyone can appreciate it for what it is, fun. I just view it all as fun, right?
Well, yeah.
Am I wrong to view it that way?
No, here's what it is.
Should I be upset about this?
It's more Taylor Swift than it is Colin Kaepernick. It's more, it's on the screen. It's a part of the what's trending and what's crazed about, the fans that are watching and those that are participating or having fun with it, right, and clipping this, than it is some political movement stuff shoved down your throat where you're being told, hey, you need to think this way. There's messages in the end zone. You're going to put messages on to replace your last name on either your jersey or on your helmet. It's the complete opposite of that. So I'm not viewing it as something that's get in line or get out, which is what the mindset and the tone was with all of it. No one's taking a knee.
It's not
protest.
End racism day in the NFL.
It's not a protest.
No.
It's a trend. And again, it is more of a. You're right. It's more of what's trending on a TikTok or what it's on a meme than it is. This popular player said this, so we're now going to cover it. John Jones. I mean, how much did we cover what said player or said analyst would say about the election? I never heard John Jones come out and say anything publicly.
No.
But if Aaron Rodgers did, that was covered to the max as if it was some, anti-American way of thinking. When the truth is, there are a lot of people that were tired of being told that was an anti-American way of thinking, just the freedom of thought. Thinking for yourself.
It's fun. Like, it's fun to watch people dance that way.
And
it's caught fire here recently for that reason. It comes in the wake of a landslide win for Donald Trump also, where he sweeps all the battleground states. So it all kind of is slotted right in line with what you think might happen in a moment like this. And it's become a moment.
And for whatever reason, we had NBC a few weeks ago edit out something on, was it X, and then keep Bosa's hat on.
They posted
on
something
YouTube.
without it, then they put it back in because people complained about that. And then they did something else because people complained about that.
But never edited it out of everything. It was again, it's weird. You still have what Armando pointed out with CBS, with the social media and working, overtime after the game to cut out certain things with the celebration and highlights. But it's not editing out what people are going to do or what they think. They can try not to push this, and they're trying their best by editing things like this. But ultimately, it's already caught on, and it's here.
Do we think that Brock Bowers, his media availability ending right after the question about the Trump dance, was a coincidence?
No.
Or that his time was not up? They're just like, we don't want to continue talking about this.
I mean, I don't know how long he had been talking.
Yeah.
To be fair to that question you're asking, I don't know. But, I mean, to abruptly end it, as is being described, no, there's no coincidence with that.
Yeah, and I don't know.
But he's allowed to say whatever he wants.
Right. And with all this going on, I do think we're entering a better area of it's not just complete censorship going down on one side of this, because, to my knowledge, everyone has been allowed to do the Trump dance with no big repercussions from people in media or anything else. And if people disagree with it, like Amina Kimes or someone else, they're not being overly vocal about it. No. They're just not talking about it. They're moving on.
Or showing it.
Yeah, and pretty much everyone at ESPN has been told no politics at all. So you're not seeing much of that anywhere. But with this one, I don't know that – I'm not going to jump to the conclusion that whoever's handling media relations for the Raiders in that moment is just so anti-Trump they don't want to hear Brock Bowers answer more questions about Donald Trump and his support of Donald Trump, as much as protecting players from saying something maybe that could get them in trouble with the league or something like that. But there could be any number of things going on with it.
Again,
I don't think it's a coincidence. I also am not going to jump to the conclusion of
why
the media relations person hates Donald Trump so much that he or she pulled Brock Bowers aside after answering that one question and would not let him answer any more questions.
I'm not buying that.
I think they have like a pre-trained brain reaction to, let's avoid any possible controversy, whether I agree it's controversy or not. I want to get my player, my client, whoever, away from it, right?
Yes.
Not you can't say that, or I don't want you to say that, but let's just in case protect anything bad from happening. That's the way I took it.
How about Trump at UFC? I mean, it is just a perfect fit with the audience. You've got the demographic, and everyone's cheering for him at MSG. You've got the greatest fighter presenting him with the championship belt. I mean,
it was quite the scene for him on Saturday night.
Awesome. Yeah, it's cool. It's cool. And, Dana White, and he hit it off whenever Dana and the Fertittas purchased the UFC for, millions, but they've turned it into what they sold for $4 billion. I bet it's worth 10 now, if not more, because the company's merged now with WWE.
Did you pay more attention to Saturday night or Friday night with Paul Tyson?
Friday night. And only because Saturday night I'm watching more football.
Yeah.
But
we watched that around the campfire. We had an iPad someone brought and connected it and watched Paul Tyson Friday night.
So you were able to stream it on your phone or your laptop?
I was able to see it on a tablet.
Okay. I may be I'm in the minority here. I think what happened with the streaming issues were great for Netflix.
Do tell.
They're
explain this to
reporting
me.
60 million or so viewers for that, right? By the time it got to the actual main event, there were no issues that I'm aware of. It's the undercard that was lagging. I was at a sports bar watching it, so it was bad. But number one, it's free. I think that's important. They didn't charge for this. Number two, they had the second largest audience next to a Super Bowl on their streaming platform. And they were able to pull off the main event without incident, to the number of just everyone complaining prior to the actual main event walking between Tyson and Jake Paul. And the third thing, they've got the WWE Monday Night Raw contract that starts next year. But before that, they've just bought the rights to Christmas Day games, back-to-back doubleheader with the NFL. And they have Kansas City taking on Pittsburgh in one of those. That's going to be a massive audience. I think they were able to see what they can do well, what they need to do, what they can withstand, the type of viewership that they're going to pull. And ultimately, I find it impressive they pulled off the main event without having to delay anything or, actually have the complaints be about not being able to see who actually won or lost or who was scheduled to or scripted to win or lose that fight compared to what it could have been, which is a total disaster.
I do wonder if they had some way to juice the numbers, that if you went in, you had technical problems, you had the spinning wheel, and then you logged back out and logged back in. Does that count as two viewers?
I think
or
it's
two
a count.
views?
I think they're
yeah, but it's also a little
there
bit.
There is no regulation of it,
right? Yeah, they could say whatever they want.
They do have
it's a little mysterious.
300 million worldwide subscribers. So I mean, to me, with the global audience that they had, I don't find that to be misleading on the number. I find it believable that they could have 60 million that wanted to stream it.
What percentage of America do you think was rooting for Mike Tyson to knock him out?
90.
Yeah. Very high, right?
90%.
Everyone I watched with was for Tyson in that fight.
And
Jake Paul said once he got to the third round, he could tell he was struggling, with his conditioning and everything, that he kind of took it easy on him, didn't go for the knockout.
Yes.
Which was very clear to see. I don't know that it was fixed or rigged or any of that. It was just very anticlimactic after what was a sensational women's boxing match before that.
Oh, yeah.
Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano was some of the best entertainment I've seen. If I got snookered into watching that just so I could see that women's match, I'm fine with it, because that was awesome to watch.
Well, you're watching for the entertainment aspect of it. And I sent Davey some videos. I don't know if he forwarded these to you, Adam, or not. But there are training videos of Tyson. He's not wearing a knee brace. And he's certainly a lot better and a lot faster and quicker with his reactions than what we saw on Friday night. But beyond that, the spectacle is just, we want to see Tyson and see what he's got, and can he please just knock this dude out? But Netflix was able to prove that they can, whatever the issues were, fix it. They at least joked about it whenever they announced the number. They're like, hey, and along the way we, had
a few hiccups.
Had some hiccups. Jake Paul put out that more people watched the illegal stream of my fight with Mike Tyson with the NBA playoffs average, with what the NBA playoffs average. 6.6 million watched Antonio Brown streaming the video board in Dallas.
I love that AB was there.
Once you click on the legal stream, that's all you need. Now, I say that there were no issues with the main event. Maybe there were. I just didn't. Where I was, there were awful problems, and then all of a sudden everything was good.
Yeah, I saw no real issues on my end, but it's an interesting interlude. It was spun a little bit, but it was just kind of it went in and out for a couple times. But I think it's an interesting start to what is going to be a huge live sports enterprise for Netflix and what the direction they're going.
And they're doing this. They've got the subscribers. now they're going to sell to advertisers. And it's DVR proof, so to speak. And the other part of it, Chad, they have the, I mean, what's the recourse in wanting to watch this entertainment boxing bout and not being able to do it because of lagging issues, or, the circle of death, right? You didn't pay for it. It's through your subscription. And we already know that they can up the price by $5 a month, and everyone will complain about it, but you still pay your bill at the end of the month. I don't think there's too much to complain about, given the fact that it wasn't Christmas Day and your favorite team wasn't playing. And again, the next largest audience they'll have is Taylor Swift's going to be on their platform.
Well, it's a huge net positive.
I think
regardless of the issues. I mean, I don't think
it's
the issues were a good thing.
Especially when you
but they're still a huge winner at the end of it.
Especially when you know that Peacock, they had 30 million subscriptions based on their playoff game last year.
Their Chiefs-Dolphins game.
Streaming only, right? And they pulled that off without any problems. Amazon does this on Thursday nights, right? And then Netflix tries it, and you have this. So, again, I think all things just being fair here, everyone got to see what they wanted to see, except for the knockout. And Netflix was able to see what they can and can't pull off just by throwing this on.
You also got to see Mike Tyson's 58-year-old cheeks as he was wearing the thong as he walked away. There was
How about the kiss?
Hilarious post where someone was like, this is the old man at your local gym who does 15 minutes on the elliptical and then goes and gets in the sauna. He did the interview and just walked away, and it was just bare ass as he walked away from you.
How about AB's post where he put out like everything he's accomplished within the last year? He goes, what a year. What a banner year for everything I'm about.
For CT ESPN?
Yes. Pull it up here. It was fantastic. Here it is. My resume in 2024 will go down in the history books. Forming CT ESPN, #1 source. Becoming #1 X-influencer. Breaking sports tackles. Or sports trades. Sports trades. Leaking NFL jerseys. Speaking at Trump rally. Attend Steelers game with Trump. Helping Trump win Pennsylvania. Breaking X record for live viewers. More to come.
The photo from New York Post, too, of him sitting ringside with the sunglasses on is classic.
AB.
He's my Moby Dick. He's my white whale of a guest for this show. If we can ever make it happen. I think last time we reached out to him, he was charging like $5 million for an interview. What was it, Adam?
Like 20 grand.
20 grand. 100,000.
Oh, 100,000.
A little less than $5 million, as I said.
If he
but
was,
you get the picture.
And who knows?
Might as well be $5 million because no one's paying $100,000 for it.
Yeah, who knows what?
$1 trillion is what I charge for interviews.
Like, you know how we describe College Station as it's a cult, right? Yeah. At A&M, and there's really, and I don't mean that as a negative here. There's really no other word to describe it. And I had never been, and I've always heard that. And
I mean it as a negative. Well, it's a little weird to me.
But when I'm there, I loved it. I thought it was a blast. But you're in this snow globe bubble, and you leave. You drive 2 hours to Houston, and you fly back home, and you're like, man, that is a cult.
Yeah, Houston's really nothing like College Station.
Yeah, but like
totally different place.
When you're in it, you're like, man, this is a good time. That's pretty much Antonio Brown's social media persona to me. When I'm in the depths in the wormhole of Antonio Brown X or anything he's posting or videos, I'm thinking, yeah, this is fun. I'll keep scrolling. And then when I'm done with it, I'm like, man, what a shit show.
Yeah. God, I feel the need to take a shower.
I mean,
what's going on?
There's no other word to describe it. That's where I am on it.
You want to go read like a good piece of nonfiction, just a huge book when you get done with the AB's Twitter feed?
Yeah.
Because
I mean, you
feel like your brain is going to ooze out of your ear if you don't. That's the way I feel. But I love it.
Yeah.
I love him.
With that, I'm his cracker of the day.
Yes. Cracker of the day.
Pacman Jones arrested after this fight, too.
Shocking.
I know.
Man loves a good arrest after a fight.
Arrested yet again. Now, he's claiming there was a racial slur thrown his way. Again, as Pac would, we'll always have to wait for things to play out in court with Pacman Jones. But he's arrested, Chad. And what is a lengthy timeline of Adam Jones being watched. Look at those shoes, by the way. looks like maybe a mascot of Pacman Jones walking out. And, of course, he spent time here in Nashville with the Titans. There were a lot of problems. Plenty of examples that we can point to on a timeline of arrests and run-in with,
he really
with
liked
law
to
enforcement.
spit on people. There
was
a lot of spitting.
The everything that played
the
out
most
in Las
tragic
Vegas.
is the Urbanski shooting situation in Vegas.
Yeah.
Was this in Vegas? Where was it?
This was in Dallas.
Okay, it was at, I got you, Friday night.
This was in Dallas. And, so par for the course, but there's Pac just
He's packing it up.
being Pac, I guess.
That's what Pac-Man does.
Chad, so this is what the College Football Playoff Committee is doing. The bidding of ESPN in the hype game. We go from boxing and the hype of this fight to UFC. Dana White's the hype master here. He's top promoter in the world. That's what we're seeing right now in college football with the College Football Playoff Committee. Kirby Smart was critical after Georgia's win over Tennessee, probably over Texas too, about the criteria for which the playoff committee is going to select teams to be a part of the first playoff that is 12 teams. And this is on the heels of, after beating Tennessee, going through a week where, they wouldn't have been in the 12-team playoff given last week's rankings.
In a week when there's been a lot of conversation about your tough schedule, playing on the road, some of the struggles that you guys have had, but also some of the positive moments, what do you think you showed the committee tonight?
Well, I don't know, because I don't know what they look for. I really don't know what they look for anymore. So I would welcome anybody in that committee to come down to this league and play in this environment. It's a tough place to play.
Glory, glory, hallelujah. Kirby Smart critical there, just like we all are. He's saying nothing more than what all of us are saying, right? Like, okay, how are they basing this on a weekly basis? What are they going to actually do on December 8th when they have the bracket announcement? But my issue with the College Football Playoff Committee and the selection process is we focus more about what Kirby Smart's saying about, we don't really know what they're doing. There are groups of people who do know the criteria on how to make the college football playoff. And I think we should be more critical of that more than ever, especially with this being the first year of the 12-team playoff and knowing that we're moving to a 16-team playoff very soon. We treat this like those in the room, this group of people selected to bring in the nation's best college football teams for a run at the championship, don't know what they're tasked to do. They absolutely do. ESPN knows the criteria. Because my question would be, how else would they be able to, with their AI system, give you a percentage chance of your team making the playoff, projecting what would happen on a schedule? Chad went through this and detailed it, and I don't know if you can pull up the exact percentages that you had, Chad, last week prior to the loss to Georgia. But Chad went in with Tennessee's schedule and went ahead and credited Tennessee with a loss to Georgia. But, of course, a win with UTEP, and then beating Vanderbilt after a loss with Georgia actually increased their playoff chances to a point where they would be in. But an SEC championship game loss dropped them considerably. How would ESPN know that, given the fact that we're told that they're not going to look at really a loss in a championship game? It's only going to help those who win the conference titles the week after the regular season is over. It's because ESPN knows. It's because ESPN, this is their programming. And you better believe Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti, who had a massive hand in making all of this happen, they know the criteria too. It's us on the outside that don't know. But I've never once heard any of the 14 playoff with those that served on those committees come out of it and say, you know what, this was just a horrible experience. It's confusion. I don't really know what we're looking for in there. We're going by this, but not that, but they present us with this. No, everybody's been like, it was a great experience. Yeah, I think we came to a conclusion. We disagreed on things. We came up with the teams that we thought were the best teams to represent the college football national championship. That's what they say. They were complaining that they had to consider Michigan last year. They knew that they were tasked with putting those teams in there. Why? Because it's the hype game. And I think the confusion adds more to the drama. Tennessee's going to fall out of the college football playoff rankings tomorrow, just like Georgia did. It'll create a lot of commotion, like a lot of vitriol and anger, just like it did with the Bulldogs fans. And then you win a game, and a week later you're in, and there's a sigh of relief. And then you're on to the next program that's on the brink of elimination. That's just what they're doing. And then the algorithm comes into play that's already told you there's no reason to panic, because just beat Vandy and don't lose in the SEC championship game, and you'll be in. Do you have these percentages?
Don't get to the SEC championship game also. I can
That's
tell
fair.
you by memory,
Okay,
it
good.
was, if they win, it was something like 97% in if they beat one at Georgia.
Right.
If they lost, it dropped to around 60. Now, today it's like 66%.
Okay.
After the happenings of the weekend, that Tennessee's still going to be in with 2 losses.
Okay.
But if they lost in the SEC championship game, that number would go down to 27%.
Yeah.
But then if they lost to they lose to Georgia, beat Vandy, it was back up to 70. It was bouncing around all over the place. But here's what it does. I think you're right, Hutton. Tennessee is now this week's Georgia. Mm-hmm. A week ago, the referendum was on the Georgia Bulldogs, and boy, they looked rough, and Ole Miss, and is the team picked to win it all in the preseason, and a team that won back-to-back national titles just 2 years ago, are they not even going to make the playoff at all? Tune in to ABC Saturday night, 7:30 Eastern, to find out. Well, that was the perfect segue and lead in, because they had the property. They knew they were going to carry Tennessee and Georgia on Saturday night, and Georgia came through at home, as I and many others expected, including Vegas, that had them as a double-digit favorite. But now Tennessee loses, and you're going to have that panel and everyone else sit there and probably look at Tennessee as the first team out or somewhere right around that range and say, boy, Tennessee has got the 7th toughest schedule in America right now. Are they going to be left out with 2 losses? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Unfortunately, they play UTEP on Saturday in a game that probably not many are going to watch on TV. But then it's just pivoting to what's the next big ESPN game
let's rewind.
that we're going to talk about with these rankings.
Let's rewind just a previous week from Georgia's dip out. It was Bama. Bama LSU.
Yep.
It's the same thing, and that was the first week of the college football playoff rankings. It's the same storyline, just with a different representative and actor. Now, I will say, by the time we get to Texas A&M, that will also be a fact. They're also going to set this up for Indiana, Ohio State. Like, they've already set the precedent of Georgia falls out, Tennessee, I think, will fall out. You know, you have that one loss, and it really drops you at this time of year. So what happens with Indiana, based on where they are ranked tomorrow, compared to if they lose, not if you lose, but how you lose to Ohio State? And again, if or how. And if they win, we certainly know the reaction from the committee. But it's not like this group of people get into a room and they don't know really what they're doing. They're just making this up as they go. They know what they're tasked with doing. And the powers that be in college football, they know. Greg Sankey knows the criteria. Tony Petitti knows the criteria. They have to serve those that are on board. Notre Dame is going to be in, regardless of the strength of schedule. Why? Because Notre Dame agreed they would not get a bye ever, and they're not going to be able to just win their way into the top 4 and be a number 1 team. If they're the number 1 team in America, they will not get a bye. It's only the conference champions. You also have to consider the differences in the top 2, the top tier, SEC and Big Ten. There are different factors that make both conferences great and powerful. Strength of schedule for the Big Ten is not one of them. So they're not just going to focus on that publicly. Vice versa, for certain losses this time of year. Well, the Big Ten didn't lose. We didn't suffer a loss down the stretch. It's about winning, not losing. Well, SEC plays a tougher schedule. So is it about your entire resume, or is it about what you've done for me lately? Is it about conference champions? They also have to serve that aspect of it. But guess what the big debate isn't about? Should the Big 12 get 2 teams in? We already know they're getting 1. Same thing for the ACC, because they're not really a part of this they weren't a part of what was put together. They're along for the ride, and it's, hey, take your $8 million for your representative, and you're guaranteed what, $16 million if you just get the bye because you're paid per week in every round you advance.
Yeah,
Again, to me, that's more about that.
In Thanksgiving terms, ACC and Big 12 are at the kids' table. And
Right.
so you take your scraps, you take your one automatic bid, you get in the top four, possibly.
You can get
or
more than
Boise
one.
State gets you. But
You can get more than one bid, but again, you get more than one bid whenever it's Florida State Clemson.
I'm looking at current projections, Hutton, on the ESPN FPI to make it.
Please.
Notre Dame's at 68.9% currently.
Okay.
That's right ahead of Tennessee at 66.4%. Tennessee is ahead of Miami at 62.7%. That's me hearing from ESPN that their algorithm has Miami at a 62.7% chance to win the ACC because that's the only team's getting in, right? They're saying that's the percentage chance. Ole Miss is at 62%. Ole Miss is going to be ahead of Tennessee this week in the rankings. But
Thank
yet
you.
somehow
How do they
Tennessee
know
will
that?
probably be, I'm going to guess right now, the first team out. Yet Ole Miss is 4% less likely to make the playoff than Tennessee.
So
As of, November 18th. This is the FBI ranking. Indiana right now is at 96.6% to make it. Ohio State's at 94.6%.
now look at the strength of schedule for non-SEC college football playoff contenders. 43rd for Oregon. 28th for Ohio State. Penn State's at 35th. Look at IU. 106th. And they're at 90 what percent to make the playoff?
Which one?
Indiana?
Indiana's at 98% or 97%.
Almost the same number as where they are for their non.
They match it up perfectly with their
For their
national strength of schedule ranking.
Again, I say all this to say, let's be critical of not of the fact that there's confusion. We shouldn't have it based on, we hear these percentages and it's like, I mean, that's also being discussed at the bar.
Guys,
with
can
your
we see
buddies.
that graphic again too, please?
You're discussing strength of schedule and you're discussing, hey, but ESPN says 60-something% chance this week. Think about how they come up with this formula. It's because there's a formula. And when you see, again, you can't harp on one area or the other because you have two big benefactors in the Big Ten and the SEC that can point to different areas of what make their conference really great compared to the other and why their teams are more deserving. Ultimately, they get about the same amount of teams in, Chad, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's where the agree to disagree or the common ground comes into effect with Sankey and Petiti.
Does the NCAA have their own, they have their own metric system for NCAA basketball tournament when they're looking at net ranking and metrics and strength of schedule
Right.
and all that? I'm just curious because I have looked at 4 different sets of rankings for strength of schedule. And I've seen Tennessee, as an example, anywhere from 7th to 49th nationally in strength of schedule. So I'm not sure where that calculation comes from on this graphic and if that's an NCAA calculation or not. Let's find out where we got that and who's generating this.
Well, we know it's not worth 49th because on this it says no SEC team ranks below 38th.
The
nationally.
49, but then I've got another one where the top 8 strongest schedules in America are all from the SEC. You got to get to 9 in Ohio State to find the first non-SEC school, and then it jumps right back to Texas at 10 after that. So, 12 of the first 13 are SEC schools. On another ranking I'm looking at.
Bobby Carpenter's going to join us in 25 minutes. Now he's going to join us at the next hour.
Let's unite the metrics, is what I'm saying. I like the college football playoff percentage chance because ESPN has kind of cornered the market on it with their algorithm, and they're carrying the actual tournament. So I tend to look at those percentages more.
Yeah.
But
those are the ones I think I would pay attention to.
I'm just on the interwebs right now. I'm seeing so many different strength of schedule rankings that are all over the map for these schools.
There's another
all
branch to this. Let's just continue because, again, Bobby's going to join us in 20 minutes. There's another thing I thought about over the weekend. Chad, the faking injuries debate in the SEC. ESPN analyst, Herb Street's leading the way, but there are others. All of a sudden, the network is all about pointing these out, like showing the frame-by-frame instant replay of a guy who, after a play gets up and then looks to the sideline and then drops, right? Like a grenade goes off. And they're overly critical of it now when it's been going on for like 2 years. Sankey puts out a statement in November, like earlier this month, and it's, what took so long? Well, clearly ESPN, and my theory is ESPN Bet has a factor with this now. They're in the gaming industry. Well, the fact that the criteria is known by these percentage chances, and you can certainly wager on who's going to make the playoffs and who's not, I think now more than ever we should be critical about the transparency of this. Going into year one, setting a precedent for what we should see, and the formula should be known. Just like do we really know the NCAA tournament formula, though? Like, that's the other part of it, too.
Well, we at least know their net rankings, and then they tell you who's in the tournament.
And we know there's one ranking for net ranking.
Yeah. And just because you're top 50 in the net, or even 40 sometimes, or top 30, you may not get in based on what the committee thinks.
And I referenced this maybe a couple of weeks ago, but there was a reporter for The Athletic who was a part of you can go and experience as a media member what it's like to be on the committee, College Football Playoff Committee. This is when it was for.
Was it Heather Dinich?
No.
Okay.
No. And the process was different than what was expected. Like, you don't come in and just tomorrow present your top 25 and put it on the table, and then they just come up with the consensus. You are presented with groups, pods of teams, and then you rank your top. They rank their consensus top 25 based on analyzing 3 teams at a time, and then ranking those 3 teams 1, 2, 3, and then you slot those teams. So you come up with your number 1 through 3, then you come up with your 4 through. That's how they go about it. Well, at the end of it, then you have some big debates, and certain people have to leave the room because of affiliations, whatever. But on top of it, as part of the the information that you have a lot of analytics. But on their strength of schedule part, and again, I don't know the exact formula they're using for this, but their wins and losses, there's like it more so than the final score, which isn't emphasized. What's emphasized is how difficult of an opponent and how that team was playing based on how bright green the box is around that part of their schedule compared to dark red. And then it fades from green to more or less gray and then gets darker. And if it's in the middle, it's just a very average matchup. Green is great, red is bad. And if you have more, and they stack it based on the color, not based on when you played them. So if you end up having 6 boxes that are green and then it fades away to more, if you're comparing 2 teams, that's in this reporter's eyes, it was kind of how he determined, hey, I should lean more this way with this team than Florida State. That was, and by the way, this trial committee, they didn't have Florida State get in, which I found interesting.
Well, it's just, look, if you are going to get down to the nitty-gritty of 12 teams. Yeah, and I know you're talking about it with that.
We still don't know what they did. We assume there's just here's my top 25 this week.
I think anybody on the committee, I could do this. Anybody on the committee could take any team that's worthy of being around the top 12 and formulate an argument of what they're going to go say in an interview and asked about this team over this team. And it could sound great to the layman, but the question everyone has in mind is, well, how do you pick that team you defend their resume more than the other one? Because I could just as easily, Tennessee versus Ole Miss is a good example. Indiana versus Penn State, Indiana versus Ole Miss, Penn State versus Tennessee, Notre Dame versus some of these SEC 2-loss teams. With Notre Dame, with their 1 loss being Northern Illinois, are we talking about best win? Because Notre Dame's best win is at A&M, good win, but worst loss, is that a big factor? They got the worst loss in America. At home to a below-average MAC team in Northern Illinois. Tennessee versus Ole Miss, are we talking best win? Ole Miss handled Georgia at home, great. Tennessee handled Alabama at home. Great, probably a wash. Tennessee's loss at Arkansas isn't nearly as bad as losing to Kentucky at home. But what's the second best win then? Well, Ole Miss has the better second best win because they won easily at South Carolina. I could do this all day for any of these teams. My concern and question is, how does the committee come to the idea of, here's who I'm going to back. Here's who we're going to defend against all these other teams. Because once you get on that right side of them, it's over. Like, you could make an argument, and a compelling one, for a lot of these schools.
But they know the task at hand and what the network has told them to look for. Again, ESPN is one of the very few that's going to be pretty spot-on accurate with how they're doing this.
And ESPN still is going to carry all the other bowl games. Most of them.
So
again, I don't think that they're going to take someone they think is going to be a big draw in the playoff and move them to the Outback Bowl or the Tampa, whatever it's called now in Tampa. But that's going to be a factor too, because they help select what they want on television and what matchups they want in the other bowls.
Using factors of strength of schedule, results, championships won, common opponents, and more. Well, the and more is also, that's the part that everyone's confused by. And also, how are you tiering these factors? Right? Like, whatever they come up with, there will be teams left out. I love the drama of this right now. I do. I'm not complaining one bit that we have a 12-team playoff. But I do hear a lot of complaining about, the committee doesn't know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. They're doing exactly what they were asked to be a part of. And those that have done it and moved on, I don't hear them complaining about some confusion or it being unorganized. What I haven't heard, I'm also factoring in.
I think it's also easy to get lost in the shuffle if you're just a really good team. Some teams, some are flashier because, we know they have this pass rush or they have this offense or this quarterback or Travis Hunter on their team or whatever it is, or Deion Sanders coaching them.
Yep.
So you think more about them. I think there are teams that are just a victim of, they're just really good. I could name, I think Texas is kind of that way. Their offense isn't great. Their offense has been very underwhelming based on what they expected out of these guys they had coming back and Quinn Ewers. Their defense is maybe the best in the country or top 5. They're really, really good. They're solid across the board. They haven't played the most difficult schedule for an SEC team. They haven't.
Where did you have Texas this week in your OutKick rankings?
I'd have to go back and look.
So
I'm not exactly. I think I had them as the SEC champion at 2.
Me too. I went about it this week, and I've tried to do this, but we have more clarity now about which teams would I say need to be ranked in a certain way just based on head-to-head matchups do I feel like would win, right? And by and large, I'm looking at a lot of SEC programs, but the way teams are playing right now, Colorado's hard to beat right now. I have to factor that in with how they've played. And, Notre Dame, their loss to Northern Illinois still sits with me.
Do you have Colorado in the top 4 as the Big 12 champ?
I do. I
have them at 4, and I thought about putting them at 3 ahead of Miami.
Actually, this week I have Boise in. I have Boise ahead of Colorado in my rankings.
Oh, wow. But you have Colorado in at 12 as the Big 12 rep.
Yep. Colorado gets in, and I had Tennessee. So I had Tennessee in at 13 in mine. Because, again, I think that they will win their way back in, just like Bama did with mine. I left Bama out 2 weeks ago. But they can prove it. Like, they're going to jump up ahead of teams, with Colorado going to have to prove it and to stay there. Notre Dame's on, again, I don't know how great Notre Dame is, but I still would pick them with the way they're playing right now to win against the mid-tier SEC programs that we're seeing, being lauded as strength of schedule. Again, I think they're really good. Are they great? No, not based on my rankings.
I just think you have to factor in the 1-loss versus 2-loss teams. And I'll give an example. I'm going to take Ohio State out of this because I think they're at a different level for a 1-loss team with that 1-point loss at Oregon being their only blemish.
Yep.
Indiana with no losses, Penn State with 1, Notre Dame with 1. If I just put those teams into a bag and jumbled them up against Tennessee, Alabama, or Ole Miss, all SEC teams with 2 losses,
yep,
I would favor the SEC team versus any of those teams on a neutral field to win. I'd probably take 2 out of the 3 to win a straight-up road game at one of those teams up north. So,
yeah, okay.
What am I using to judge that? The fact I know the SEC is far and away the best conference in America, and they're more battle-tested than those teams, and I think they're better.
Where is Ole Miss for you?
Ole Miss is playing as well as anyone, and their defense might be the most dangerous in the country. So they're way up there. But right now,
I don't see them, though. That's what I'm saying.
Ole Miss, I've got them right outside, I think, at 13. But I'm saying Ole Miss versus...
Or maybe you have them at 12 or Army jumps them.
Yeah, I think I've got Army in because of the last at-large. But Ole Miss, let's say, versus Indiana.
Oh, Ole Miss.
Indiana's undefeated in the Big Ten.
Ole Miss. Yeah. I've got Ole Miss at 6.
Ole Miss versus Penn State. I saw it last year. They'd beat them again.
Ole Miss.
Ole Miss versus Notre Dame. Ole Miss. I'd take Tennessee probably over all three. Also.
Same.
Alabama, I'm definitely taking overall. Again, are they going to win a true
Georgia.
road game? Probably not. I don't think they sweep if all those games are on the road, if they're in the back half of that, but they're right there.
And but the resume for Indiana has been exceptional. And again, this is the last week where we have to say, well, what would they do? Now they get to prove it against Ohio State. Same for Ohio State. Chad, before we get to Bobby, I want to include this because I'm 100% behind you. The officiating right now in college football. I saw it firsthand in the NFL yesterday with the Titans game here against the Vikings. No one's going to talk about it because no one watched it. It was a regional game that was a very small audience, and the NFL won't address it. There's no accountability. But NFL officials are now, the funneling process is coming through the SEC and the Big Ten. And we saw some really bad officiating in Athens. There
was really bad officiating in Athens. We'll get specifically to that here a little bit later with some specific calls. And Davey Hudson, who's out today, has a bit of a conspiracy theory on the head official of that game and his history with Tennessee, which Georgia won the game, but it was a poorly officiated
game. Yes, it was.
I'm not going to blame it all on the officials, but poorly officiated. I want to point to a moment earlier in the day. Pittsburgh hosting Clemson. I'm watching this thing live, and I'm going to show you what I posted because I went back and we took a pause the screenshot of what happened. This right here was not called a penalty in this game. It looked like a wrestling move that actually connected. I mean, you had a defensive lineman
people's elbow
break through the line. This was before the quarterback was going to run. He started to run from the pocket, and he got elbowed in the chin, knocked backwards. It was the most – you know how you see sometimes a very obvious 15-yard face mask penalty where the head rips down?
You could tell.
Or rips back up?
The motion.
Show the picture one more time.
Yeah.
This happened live, and I'm telling you, it's not like, oh, boy, we went back and saw it on a still photo, and it didn't do service to what happened. This is lame compared to what happened in real time. It was whiplash. The dude looked like he was dead for Pittsburgh. There are officials standing everywhere looking right at it. He stumbles to the ground. No one throws a flag. Pat Narduzzi of Pitt is losing his effing mind on the sideline. All of the officials huddle, get together, very eerily similar to Texas against Georgia when this happened. Stadium is going nuts. Thank God no one threw anything. Good job, Pittsburgh fans. Probably weren't enough there to throw. But regardless, they were getting ready for the Steelers game the next day in the same stadium. No one threw stuff on the field. But they're watching what happened. In real time, you heard a gasp. And then no flag. And everyone's looking around like, what's going on? Then you see it on the Jumbotron afterward. Pat Narduzzi's losing his mind. Everyone's going nuts. The officials are just kind of, they're not telling them to settle down. They're just kind of telling them like, okay, calm. You could tell they knew they effed up big time. And someone saw it on the screen. And then they get together and they say, after a conference, we have decided to throw a 15-yard flag for unsportsmanlike conduct, unnecessary roughness, I think was the call, whatever it was. But it doesn't change the fact that someone who's paid to officiate a big-time college football game is staring at that play and doesn't pick up their flag and throw it. It's a mystery to me. A true mystery as to how someone could be so inept. I know that mistakes happen.
And it's the quarterback we're talking about.
But how?
I don't
you could
know.
take anyone off the street. They could stand in for one play.
You would think so.
And watch that and clearly see the guy's head nearly get ripped off. Show this one more time. Going back, it's like the Seinfeld episode, back into the left. Back into the left. He's getting hit, nearly concussed, knocked down, no flag.
The WNBA would call this a basketball play.
Well, we say all the time, be better. Coaches out there, be better. Quarterbacks, be better. Kickers, be better. Hit the kick. Officials, be better. We got to be better than this.
Maybe the WNBA refs are there.
I'm glad people do it, yes. I'm glad that people do it because I would never want to officiate. So I'm happy that someone decides to go down that path of being a major college official. If you were doing that, though, and get to that point and you're receiving a paycheck and your product is that, you need to self-evaluate. And the conference needs to evaluate.
And it's not.
And college football fans, don't throw shit on the field to protest, but we got to be loud about this because that's unacceptable. What I saw in Athens, Georgia, consistently throughout the night, there are calls that are unacceptable. And it got Josh Heupel just turning the mic around to ask reporters what they saw on a play when asked questions about it. Instead of criticize them, I say criticize away. If it's that bad, go ahead and say it.
There's no accountability, and we're seeing college football become the NFL. This is another example of that. There's zero accountability for NFL when it comes to the officiating office. They don't speak. They don't acknowledge poor officiating. They just say, yeah, we're sorry to the coach or to the GM or whoever's calling the league office on a Monday.
Or they'll find the hell out of the Utah ID when he speaks up.
Or, yeah, you'll get fined. Coaches, post-game in the NFL, they won't say a word about officials unless they want a huge fine headed their way. Players barely say anything about officials. They'll get fined too. They want everyone to pipe down and move on to the next week and not have to, spend much time training the officials, which, they claim they do, but it's getting worse, or paying the officials more to when you then want full-time and you have expectations, right? Like there's still this part-time deal where Clete Blakeman yesterday for the head official for the Titans game against the Vikings. Chad, there was a touchdown that was it was a fourth down stop by the Titans. Game was 7-3.
A great hit to the chest of a player.
Legal player. They
dislodges the ball and they call it targeting.
They claim Mike Brown launched. In order to do that, based on the rule, you have to leave your feet. That didn't happen. And he also didn't contact the helmet. He contacted his chest with his shoulder. It wasn't even leading with the helmet.
It was a good hit.
Great hit, fourth down stop. And instead, 2 plays later, after the first down was given, from the 1-yard line, touchdown. So it's a 10-point game. Later, there is a defensive holding call that's phantom. They called a horse collar on special teams. That was not even close to a horse collar. There was no debate about it on the replay. But there's not going to be anything from the league office unless it's Kansas City against Buffalo. There's Cletus W. Blakeman, attorney at law. He's a personal injury lawyer. Clete Blakeman isn't going to be working Kansas City and Buffalo. He's working the game in Nashville because no one's really going to cry foul about that. Meanwhile, if it does happen in Kansas City and Buffalo, they'll change rules for that. Right?
Yeah, and
that's when there's no accountability unless the fans demand it.
We also, and to demand it, we have to unite.
Yeah.
Braveheart, unite the clans. Unite all of Scotland behind this. You have to unite, and you can't just dismiss someone bitching about the officiating as, well, that's loser talk. You lost the game, so now you're creating an excuse. No, you have to have certain plays where every fan who's watching the game can admit that was a terrible call.
Yep.
We need better. Even if you're the beneficiary of it, you have to admit at some point that's a bad call. The other team is right. We got to be better. So everyone's got to honestly call it out and demand that NFL and big-time college football officials and officiating in general be better. I don't want to harp on the calls at all time. People are going to come back and say, well, bad calls happen. Well, bad calls like the one I pointed out in that Pitt-Clemson game, that shouldn't happen. That's not an excuse. Oh, well, bad calls happen. You got to deal with it. No, you can't miss that.
And I'm talking about games
and
too.
They eventually got to the right call because they decided to see the replay, and so they got to the right conclusion.
Good for them.
But I'm tired of that having to be the case in some of these instances.
But I'm talking about games and officiating crews that it's over and over. It's more than just one bad call in the same game. Like there has to be a recourse for that, and there's just not. It's a 24-hour cycle, if that, 12 hours, and then you're on to the next crew, right? Like that. It starts from the top down. And we're talking about the best conferences in college football right now. We're not talking about, the Sun Belt officials.
Right.
This happens in the SEC, Big Ten, ACC. That's a problem.
These games are not taking place in the CW, is what we're saying.
Yes.
Even though those are ACC games in the CW. They need to be better too.
Yes.
Just because you're on the CW does not give you the right to miss a call like
still
that
betting
in
on
Pittsburgh
these games.
Clemson game.
We're still betting on these games.
My wallet dictates you make the right call in those moments.
No doubt.
We cannot have any sense of impropriety in our college football games. And that's why they don't want you to complain about it, Because they don't want the public ever second guessing
absolutely not.
that the refs are behind anything or the league office is behind it or any of that.
They need to be behind being better. To Chad's point, I'm 100% all in.